Welcome back to Pokemon episode summaries. Today, I'll be doing episode 302, Turning Over a Nuzleaf. The episode begins with Ash and the gang going back through Granite Cave after Ash had finished all of his training, because he viewed the area with all the Mudkip from last episode as a training area. So he was like, alright, I think I have enough training in now, let's go beat Brawly, guys. Brock was initially confused when Ash wanted to go back, believing that he wanted to go back to the inlet to train. So he initially told Ash that going back to the Granite Cave wouldn't be a good idea, as that wouldn't take them to the inlet, but Ash clarified what he really wanted. While they walked through Granite Cave, Ash and the gang made jokes to each other about how they had got lost in Granite Cave, when Ash and Max began to complain of hunger, leading Max to request Brock to make some special stew for breakfast, but Brock said that he would only do it if Max would make a funny Corphish impression, as he wanted to be amused. And Brock was amused, as Max obliged, leading Brock to promise to make that awesome stew that Max wanted. Just then, we could see that Ash's Trico, Talo, and Pikachu were all out, as well as his Corphish, while May's Torchic and Silcoon were out, with May holding her Silcoon, and Brock's Mudkip and Lotad were out, all walking with Ash and the gang. Suddenly, Corphish heard something coming from a nearby tunnel, so it went inside as fast as possible, and it found the same sleeping Loudred that was seen in the cave back during the first time Ash and the gang were in Granite Cave. Corphish obviously hadn't seen it before though, so it was intrigued by the sleeping Pokemon and tried poking it with its pincer, and then pinched the sleeping Loudred's ear, which angered the Loudred as it began to stir, unbeknownst to Corphish, who was too focused on Loudred's ear wiggling from the pinch, and he was happy about this. But suddenly, when Corphish then clamped down on the Loudred's ear, trying to find out why it was wiggling and shit, this fully woke the Loudred, causing it to scream in pain and run around the tunnel. Back with Ash and the gang, they looked down the tunnel that Corphish had went into, and they could merely hear the screaming and stomping of the Loudred. They then freaked out to see Corphish and the Loudred emerge from the tunnel, with Corphish still clamped onto Loudred's ear, so Loudred bashed itself against the wall, causing Corphish to fall off, and then Loudred began to continue its rampage, heading straight for Ash and the gang, and screaming as loud as possible, causing Ash and the gang to almost fall over from the sheer loudness as they covered their ears. Brock knew everyone's ears couldn't be covered forever, so he sent out his fortress and had to use Rapid Spin to smash a hole in the wall of the cave so that everyone could escape. Brock was the first one to leave through the hole, motioning for everyone else to follow him. However, before Ash and Max could make it through the hole, they were stopped by the Loudred's rampage as it smashed into a nearby rock, which created an impact so huge that Ash and the gang fell over. And this also meant that Silcoon went flying from May's hands and started rolling away, leading all of Ash and the gang's other Pokemon, or most of them at least, to go after the Silcoon so that it wouldn't get lost. These Pokemon that went after Silcoon were Pikachu, Torchic, Lotad, Mudkip, Corphish, and Trico, although Lotad was falling behind due to its slowness compared to the rest of the group. Back with Ash and the gang, they weren't too concerned about their Pokemon going away, because they didn't even notice because they were so focused on the goddamn Loudred, though thankfully, Loudred then burrowed a hole in the ground to escape, making Ash, Brock, and Max relieved that the Loudred was gone, causing them to sigh of relief that the danger was over. With Brock amazed that the Loudred was somehow able to calm itself down enough to dig a hole as good as it did. With the distraction of Loudred gone though, Ash and the gang finally realized that all their Pokemon were gone, well, most of them, and questioned where they could have went off to, especially May, when she noticed her Silcoon was gone, since she remembered having Silcoon in her hands. Meanwhile, back with most of the Pokemon, luckily, Silcoon had stopped rolling right at the edge of a small river in the cave, so Pikachu tried his best to grab it, but it couldn't reach, since Pikachu and the other Pokemon were on the hill, while Silcoon was off of it. Upon seeing Pikachu's failure, this led Corphish to take action, wanting to save the Silcoon and prove itself, as it stretched its pincer over Pikachu to try and reach Silcoon, and although it was able to, grabbing a hold of it, Silcoon must have been too slippery because it slipped from Corphish's claw, which caused the Silcoon to fall into the water, and this startled Corphish, causing Corphish to fall into the water as well, thanks to slipping. This, in turn, startles Pikachu and Torchic, causing them to fall into the river as well. But they simply used this to their advantage, as now they could swim towards the Silcoon, and upon seeing Pikachu and Torchic and Corphish doing this, Trico and Mudkip willingly dived in to help out. Lotad, still waddling behind everyone else, eventually reached the same hill that everyone was at after all this time, and dove in after everyone else. After a while of swimming, Pikachu was able to catch up to Silcoon, as it grabbed a hold of it to prevent it from slipping away anymore. But all the Pokemon soon found that they were caught in the stream and couldn't go back to the hill, so they rode downstream with Torchic riding Mudkip to avoid the water as much as possible, while Corphish, Trico, and Lotad willingly swam behind Mudkip. Eventually, the stream took them to a waterfall, and they were forced to go over it, screaming, fearing that they would die, but they were relieved to find out that there was a forest on the other side of the waterfall, and they merely landed in some relatively soft trees. Pikachu and Silcoon, with Pikachu still holding onto it, were the first ones to land, so they were witness to everyone else falling onto the trees and becoming startled when they realized that they were all stranded in the forest. But Pikachu reminded them all that at least they weren't injured. However, when Pikachu did a head count of all the Pokemon to make sure they were all there, he didn't see Corphish, and that was because Corphish was currently stuck in a hole in the ground, and it tried to wiggle free, but it couldn't, and started to yell, freaking out, which alerted Pikachu to it. So it went over to it and tried to pull it out, though it failed miserably. Thankfully, though, Trico was able to take action by using a strong pound on Corphish, which sent it flying out of the hole and up into the sky, so far that it was out of everyone's view, although Corphish quickly plummeted down and landed very hard on its feet. Despite Trico trying to help Corphish took this as an insult, since the pound attack really hurt. So it proceeded to make fun of Trico, which made Trico angry as well, and threatened to fight Corphish, and Corphish agreed, wanting to fight Trico as well. Pikachu and Mudkip knew that unity was the right thing in this case, so they quickly jumped between Corphish and Trico, trying to stop the fight, with Pikachu pushing Trico back, and Mudkip pushing Corphish back, and telling them both to calm down, though Trico and Corphish still tried to reach for each other to fight each other. While this was going on, Torchic began crying, much to Lotad's annoyance, because Torchic missed May a lot, and stressing about how all the Pokemon were lost and may never be able to find their trainers. But thankfully, Pikachu, who quit trying to calm Corphish and Trico, seeing it as a lost cause for now, directed his attention to Torchic as he tried his best to calm it and reassure it that all the Pokemon would eventually find their trainers, and this worked, calming down Torchic. To make matters better, Mudkip was actually able to calm down Corphish and Trico all on its own, explaining to the Trico how Corphish just had a misunderstanding, and explaining to the Corphish how Trico tried to help it. And now that the two Pokemon were calmed down, friends again, they shook hands to illustrate their rebuilt friendship. Or rather, Trico shook a hand, and Corphish shook a claw. Pikachu was pleased with this, as he and Mudkip picked Silcoon back up, since it could barely move on its own, and all of the Pokemon went off to find their trainers, with Mudkip and Pikachu leading the rest of the Pokemon. Meanwhile, back with Ash and the gang inside Granite Cave, upon further inspection, Ash and the gang saw that Fortress and Talo still remained with them. Ash and the gang then searched the rest of Granite Cave as much as they could, at least the top floor, but when they couldn't find any of the Pokemon, they came to the conclusion that they must have left the cave somehow, wondering where they could have went. May was worried about Torchic in particular, stressing about what would happen to it if it got separated from the other Pokemon somehow and ran into a scary Pokemon, fearing that Torchic wasn't strong enough to defend itself. May then got even more stressed out when Max pointed out that a scary Pokemon that Torchic could definitely run into was the Pokemon they had saw earlier, which he revealed was called a Loudred. Ash was curious as to what the Loudred was capable of, leading Max to tell him to look it up in the Pokedex, so Ash did so. Upon hearing about Loudred's capabilities, Max and Brock were somewhat freaked out, although May just became more determined to search and find Torchic somehow, stating that all of them had to get to all their Pokemon before Loudred did, and Ash agreed. So, Ash and the gang decided to search for their Pokemon inside the cave, hoping they had just missed an area, as Ash has Talo assist in their search by flying up into the higher levels and higher tunnels. Meanwhile, as for Team Rocket, they were also walking through Granite Cave, looking for Ash and gang, although they were frustrated because they were lost, and James was especially frustrated, remarking how it was truly hopeless since they had been lost for hours at this point. Jesse then pinned all the blame on James for getting them lost, but he disagreed and suggested that Meowth must have made a wrong turn. But Meowth then blames Jessie, saying it was her fault, which makes Jessie angry, as she then joins forces with James as the two of them gang up on Meowth, enforcing that it must have been Meowth's fault. As James then scolds Meowth for not bringing a flashlight to make the dark tunnel easier to see, so that they wouldn't get lost. Upon hearing this, though, Jessie put the blame on James again, claiming that she thought that James was the one who was supposed to bring the flashlight, and James, angered by this, switched his blame from Meowth to Jessie, stating that Jessie should have brought a goddamn flashlight, not him. Soon enough, Wobbuffet was alerted by Team Rocket's arguing as it forcibly popped out of its Pokeball, ordering Jessie as she ordered it to get back inside its goddamn Pokeball. When it refused, Team Rocket just decided to pin all the blame on not having a flashlight solely on Wobbuffet. Team Rocket then realized, though, that when Wobbuffet popped out of his Pokeball, it was standing on something. And Jessie saw that it was none other than the Loudred from earlier, and Jessie, knowing about how dangerous Loudred was, ordered Wobbuffet to get off. But before Wobbuffet could, Loudred woke up and shook Wobbuffet off of it, storming around the cave, screaming angrily, using the sheer volume of its hyper voice to send Team Rocket blasting off. Meanwhile, back with Pikachu, Silcoon, Mudkip, Torchic, Lotad, Trico, and Corphish, they were continuing to walk in the forest area, looking for Ash and the gang, although while they were walking, Corphish stumbled upon some mushrooms, and it was hungry as fuck, so it tried to eat them, being inches away from putting one into its mouth when Pikachu stopped it by running into Corphish and knocking the mushroom out of its grasp with a tackle. Corphish got angry at this, but Pikachu explained that it did that for its own good, as the mushrooms were probably poisonous, and therefore could potentially kill Corphish if they were eaten. Corphish didn't care though, as it was so hungry it thought it would die if it didn't eat immediately, so it simply went to go pick another mushroom. Mudkip, not wanting Corphish to die, took action as it managed to find a berry tree, and just as Mudkip had hoped, Corphish was way more interested in berries than the mushrooms, so he ran up to it and began to pick a whole bunch, seemingly infinite amounts of berries, and began to scarf them all down, instantly worrying all the Pokemon, especially Mudkip, since none of them wanted to be responsible for Corphish choking and dying. Unfortunately, Corphish did start choking, not just because it was eating super fast, but because the taste finally registered of the berries that it was eating being cherries, revealing their super sour taste. All the Pokemon were annoyed with Corphish's lack of self-care, allowing itself to choke, but they knew that they couldn't just let Corphish die, so Trico used Pound on Corphish, knocking him to the ground and also knocking the berry out of its throat. and Corfish was immensely thankful to Trico for this, not mad at Trico for hitting it this time, since it knew that it was to get the berry out. Corfish tried to show its happiness by jumping up and down and dancing, although the rest of the Pokemon cut it off, explaining that they had to continue searching for Ash and the gang. So that's exactly what they did, with Trico now holding Silcoon, or helping Pikachu hold it up. The Pokemon were bored as they were searching, so they decided to sing a song while they searched on to pass the time, and this song alerted a Pokemon known as Nuzleaf, who had been watching the Pokemon from up in a nearby tree. As the Nuzleaf watched, it suddenly smirked mischievously as it grabbed a leaf and whistled a song through it, because it had the power to do that, I guess. Anyways, the Pokemon soon heard this music, and they began to get drowsy as a result. And the Nuzleaf laughed immensely, almost falling out of the tree, as all the Pokemon began to walk around in a circle around a rock. Basically, he was kind of hypnotizing all the Mons with his grass whistle. Unfortunately for Nuzleaf, its laughing actually was so loud that it caused Trico to snap out of the confused state it was in, as it heard the laughing. It immediately realized he had been walking in a circle for some reason, and stopped, telling all the other Pokemon to stop as well, informing them that something weird was likely going on. In reference to the weird laughter in the trees, as all the other Pokemon now heard it as well, and Trico and Pikachu looked up into the trees to look for where this laughter could be coming from, and soon enough, Pikachu spotted the Nuzleaf still laughing hysterically. So all the Pokemon came to the obvious conclusion that it must have been the Nuzleaf that caused them to get all confused. So Trico angrily attacked the Nuzleaf, trying to stop its laughter, as it tossed its twig at it, but Nuzleaf simply dodged by jumping down from the tree onto the ground, in front of all the Pokemon. Corfish was angry at the Nuzleaf as well, so it decided to try and attack the Nuzleaf. But before Corfish could run in, Nuzleaf simply laughed at the Corfish, taunting it that it would never be able to do anything to it, which just made Corfish more angry as it went in to attack it, although Nuzleaf dodged, being very fast, being able to jump out of the way. Nuzleaf then went to taunt Corfish yet again by laughing, although it instead got immensely angry and shocked to find out that when Corfish attacked, it had managed to chop off a chunk of its leaf. Corfish and all the other Pokemon laughed at the now ugly Nuzleaf with its chopped leaf, happy that Corfish had been able to do something to it, although Nuzleaf just responded by angrily shouting out, which happened to be loud calling for allies, other Nuzleaf, and it then ran off, as the call echoed throughout the forest. The Pokemon were confused, however, because they saw that Nuzleaf had left, not angry anymore, but with a smile on its face, indicating that Nuzleaf believed that this call that it had just sent out would very much benefit it, and allow it to have its revenge. Pikachu obviously feared what these calls would entail, knowing that the Nuzleaf wouldn't be smiling for no reason, but he declared to himself that he was going to take responsibility and make sure nothing bad would happen to any of the other Pokemon. Meanwhile, back with Ash and the gang, they and Fortress continued to search the ground, while Talo searched the sky, all looking for the rest of the Pokemon. May could barely handle searching anymore, though, because she was so scared for her Pokemon that she could barely even move, worrying what would happen to her Torchic and Silcoon, praying that they were alright, leading Ash to assure May that they would be fine, since Pikachu, Mudkip, and the rest of the Pokemon were doing their absolute best to protect Silcoon and Torchic. He was sure of it, because that's how he and Brock had raised their Pokemon, to try and protect others. May cheered up at this, so she resumed her search with the others. Meanwhile, back with the Pokemon, they were continuing through the forest trying to look for all their trainers, when suddenly Corfish noticed some Pecaberries tied to a string. So Corfish, being the hungry bastard that he was, eagerly clamped onto them, trying to pull them off and take them. But Corfish actually ended up being the one taken, as soon as it tried to pull the Pecaberries down, it got pulled up into the trees. As for Lotad, while it continued to search, it found a quiet small pond and eagerly jumped in, wanting to relax. However, just as it started relaxing, it was then caught in a net and pulled up. As for Trico, it was still continuing on, but it then looked behind it to ensure that the other Pokemon were still nearby. But Trico, of course, saw that Lotad and Corfish were gone. Trico barely had any time to react, though, as suddenly a rope came down from a nearby tree and grabbed its tail. Trico tried to free itself, but it couldn't, and was pulled up by its tail into the trees as well. The remaining Pokemon, Pikachu, Mudkip, Silcoon, and Torchic, then passed by a small flower, and Pikachu, Mudkip, and Silcoon paid no attention to this whatsoever, though Torchic stopped in its tracks and became obsessed with the flower's awesome smell. And it was soon able to detect the smell coming in another direction, so it wandered off, and soon it found a whole field of those flowers, and as Torchic was eagerly smelling them all, finding the smell absolutely amazing. But just then, Torchic gets lifted up in a net into the trees as well. Although, it cries out in fear while this happens, which alerted Pikachu and Mudkip as they walked on, causing them to look back, fearing that Torchic was in trouble. While Pikachu and Mudkip looked back, though, they soon looked back the other way, as Silcoon was then pulled up into the trees by a Nuzleaf, who had jumped down from the tree to grab it and quickly jumped back up. Pikachu and Mudkip were alerted to this, and they soon spotted not only one Nuzleaf holding Silcoon, but a second Nuzleaf beside it as well. The two Nuzleaf then angered Pikachu and Mudkip, taunting them as they laughed at them and held up the Silcoon as like a prize that they had received. Pikachu, still wanting to protect the Silcoon, demanded that the Nuzleaf give it back, but the Nuzleaf just laughed some more and ran off, leading Pikachu and Mudkip to chase after them, as Mudkip was able to keep track of where the Nuzleaf had ran off to. Unbeknownst to Pikachu and Mudkip, Talo, who had been searching for all the Pokemon, saw from the sky Pikachu and Mudkip running, and so therefore it went back to Ash and the gang to report this as fast as possible. Meanwhile, deep in the forest, all of the Pokemon that had been captured by Nuzleaf, as it wasn't just Silcoon, the Nuzleaf were the culprit behind all the captures, had now put all of the captured Pokemon inside a huge wooded cage by the Nuzleaf. Specifically, 3 Nuzleaf had worked to build this cage, because there were 3 Nuzleaf in total, and as they taunted all the captured Pokemon, they talked to each other, with one of the Nuzleaf explaining how Corphish had cut its leaf, and therefore all the Nuzleaf agreed that Corphish should be punished. As for Torchic, it was crying its eyes out as it feared what the Nuzleaf were going to do to it, and even all the other Pokemon were scared as well, even though they weren't crying. Well, except for Lotad. It wasn't scared at all, it was just confused, it barely even knew what the fuck was going on. The rest of the Pokemon then just got more scared, as all of the Nuzleaf declared that they weren't just going to punish Corphish, they were going to punish all of its friends as well, which was why they had captured all the Pokemon, and they then revealed how they were going to punish all the Pokemon, as they started a fire. Likely just because they found a match in the middle of the woods, I don't fucking know. Anyways, the Pokemon knew that they were in danger from the fire, so they tried to escape, as Trico tried to pound the cage with his tail, but it wasn't strong enough. It then tried a tackle attack, but that wasn't strong enough either. Corphish then tried to break the cage with a crab hammer, but this didn't work either, causing the Nuzleaf to laugh, mocking Trico and Corphish's failed attempts. Meanwhile, as for Team Rocket, they had been blasted off into the woods after the previous blast-off, right by the cage, so they saw all the Pokemon in the cage, and they saw the Nuzleaf threatening to burn them. Although Jessie and James didn't know that they were Nuzleaf, specifically because they had never actually seen a Nuzleaf before, so Jessie asked Meowth if he happened to know who the Pokemon were, really wanting to know, because she wanted to know if they were rare, leading Meowth to explain that he did know who these Pokemon were. They were, of course, Nuzleaf. James was more interested in what the fuck the Nuzleaf were doing, trying to burn the Pokemon, leading Meowth to explain that he knew a lot about the Nuzleaf for some reason. Maybe he had read some knowledge books as well. But anyways, he explained that Nuzleaf always traveled in groups, and when one Nuzleaf was hurt, it affected the entire group. Meowth then listened to the Nuzleaf talking to get more details on these Nuzleaf specifically, and this led Meowth to hear that the leaves on the Nuzleaf's heads were super important, and he also heard that Corphish had damaged one of Nuzleaf's leaves, and therefore the Nuzleaf were angry, and that was why they were preparing to burn Corphish and the rest of the Pokemon as punishment. Meowth then stated that there was no way he could have messed up in his translation, as the Nuzleaf deciding to burn some Pokemon definitely fit with their description of being troublesome and rude, as well as being good at trickery and thieving, since they had been able to capture all the Pokemon. Upon hearing about how the Nuzleaf was angry about having its leaf damaged, Jessie declared that she could relate to that Nuzleaf on a spiritual level, stating that she would also burn the Pokemon if they did anything to her hair. And this made her want that Nuzleaf, because she believed that they obviously shared similar traits. However, she then declared that she wanted the entire family of the Nuzleaf, stating that if they were so good at trickery and thievery, then the Nuzleaf would be great to have on their side to help with their stealing, which they always seem to fail at. Meowth and James also agreed to steal the family of Nuzleaf. However, their plans soon changed when Meowth brought James and Jessie's attention to Pikachu and Mudkip that were approaching the Nuzleaf and the captured Pokemon, moving in as fast as possible. This led James to excitedly suggest that they should not only steal the whole family of Nuzleaf, but also Pikachu, although Jessie had a better idea, declaring that they should steal not only Pikachu and the Nuzleaf, but also Mudkip and all the captured Pokemon as well, since Ash and the gang were nowhere to be seen, and therefore that was Team Rocket's final plan. Anyways, as for Pikachu and Mudkip, they quickly rushed up to the Nuzleaf, and Pikachu demanded that they release all the other Pokemon, but of course, Nuzleaf refused, so Pikachu then began to spark its cheeks, showing that it wasn't afraid to go aggressive and use a Thunderbolt on the Nuzleaf, although Mudkip then jumped in Pikachu's way, stopping it, stating that it wanted to try and peacefully negotiate with the Nuzleaf instead. Pikachu respected Mudkip's calmness and wiseness to want to peacefully negotiate, so he calmed down and stopped sparking as Mudkip walked up to the Nuzleaf and began to talk with them, trying to negotiate. However, Mudkip was obviously not that good of a negotiator, as the Nuzleaf refused to release the rest of the Pokemon still. Mudkip kept trying, but suddenly a net then fell down and captured the entire Nuzleaf family. Mudkip was obviously alarmed by this, as it turned around to get Pikachu's reaction, although it saw that Pikachu was now being pulled up by a robotic hand from Team Rocket's Meowth balloon, as Team Rocket taunted how they had used Mudkip's negotiating time as a distraction to prepare a net, and now they had captured Pikachu and the Nuzleaf. Team Rocket then proceeded to brag about their many captures and did their motto, stating their plan to continue planning on capturing Mudkip and all of the currently caged up Pokemon. Pikachu was determined to free himself and prevent Team Rocket from capturing anyone else, as he tried to use Thunderbolt to escape from the robotic hand, but it was electric-proof, which even Pikachu wasn't surprised by at this point, as it seemed like Team Rocket was always doing electric-proof stuff now. However, when the Nuzleaf tried to use Leaf Blade to escape their net, they couldn't either, leading Meowth to laugh, taunting Pikachu and Nuzleaf, stating he came extra prepared this time, and designed the net out of steel so that grass moves would be ineffective, and also gloated once again about how he had made the hand shockproof, as usual. Just then, Meowth's taunting was cut off by Jessie, who was confused, telling Meowth that Meowth had said that he had designed the hand and net to be impervious to all Pokemon's attacks, not just grass and electric ones. So asked if Mudkip would be able to break through the net or not, hoping that Meowth had just neglected to mention the net and robotic hand's other resistances, and this appeared to be the case, as Meowth just continued taunting yet again, explaining that Mudkip couldn't possibly do a single thing to them, leading James and Jessie to get excited, thinking they may actually succeed with their plan this time. And James and Jesse only got more hopeful that they would actually get away, as Meowth had made the net impervious to water attacks, as Mudkip tried to break the net and the hand with a water gun, but it failed. As usual though, before Team Rocket could fly away with their captures, or attempt to capture any of the other Pokemon, their luck ran out, as Ash and the gang showed up, since Tailo had alerted them to where Mudkip and Pikachu were running off to, so they were able to track them down, as well as Team Rocket. The first thing Ash and the gang saw was not Team Rocket in their Meowth balloon, however, but the cage with all the other Pokemon, and they were determined to save them, as Brock had his Fortress use Rapid Spin, and Ash had his Tailo use Quick Attack to break the cage, freeing all the Pokemon. Ash and the gang then went up to the free Pokemon, and Brock happily greeted his Lotad and Mudkip. And May, extremely happy to have her Torchic and Silcoon back, called over to them, and they rushed over to her as they all hugged. Ash then welcomed all of his Pokemon back. However, he soon noticed that Pikachu wasn't with them and asked where he was, leading all of Ash's Pokemon to point upwards, directing Ash and the gang's attention up to Team Rocket's Meowth balloon as Ash saw the Nuzleaf family and Pikachu captured. And since Ash was so desperate to save Pikachu, he came up with the idea to have Corphish send him up to the Meowth balloon, launching him with a crab hammer. So, Corphish did this as the Nuzleaf family and Pikachu looked down to see Ash flying right at them, going super high thanks to Corphish's crab hammer. Ash was then able to grab on to the Nuzleaf's net, surprising Team Rocket that Ash was now below them. Ash then assured the Nuzleaf that he was going to free them, but stated that it may take a while, as he saw that there was a knot on the net that he had to untie first. So he tried his best to untie it, but unfortunately it wouldn't untie, making Team Rocket laugh at Ash's failure, taunting that there would be no way a little kid like him could tear the knot. However, Ash then got an idea as he began to bite at the knot, and this caused it to finally snap, and this led the Nuzleaf family to fall to the ground, extremely happy to finally be free. And also happy to have not been injured from the fall, as they were able to safely jump on the ground, kind of breaking their fall, as they jumped back up upon hitting the ground to kind of lessen their fall a little bit, if that made sense. Basically, they were able to spring off the ground to lessen the impact. Team Rocket were obviously in shock as they looked down to see that the Nuzleaf were now free, although Ash just ignored them as he managed to jump from the net that was destroyed, but as the Nuzleaf fell to the ground, to Pikachu's robotic arm, and he tried to pry the arm open to free Pikachu. Obviously, not wanting this to happen, James sent out his Capnia, instructing it to stop Ash with a pin missile. However, much to Team Rocket's shock and annoyance, Ash ducked when the pin missile was heading for him just in time, allowing the pin missile to instead hit the robotic arm, prying it open and allowing Ash to get Pikachu in his arms before Pikachu fell to the ground. And Ash quickly pivoted on top of the robotic arm to avoid falling to the ground, as he saw that they were now too high to jump down. So he didn't know how the fuck they could get back down to the ground. With Brock noticing Ash's predicament from the ground, as he stated his worries to May and Max that Ash and Pikachu would get hurt if they jumped down from the height they were currently at. However, Brock then noticed the freed Nuzleaf next to them, as well as the remains of their net that they were trapped in, and he got an idea on how to save Ash, as he called the Nuzleaf over. Meanwhile, back in the Meowth balloon, Team Rocket were laughing their asses off, taunting how, despite the mechanical robot arm being broken, they still technically had Pikachu, as he couldn't escape. However, Brock then called up to Ash and revealed his plan, as Ash then saw from the sky that it was already being implemented. Essentially, Brock had called over the Nuzleaf to help him, May, and Max hold up the remains of the net, so that Ash and Pikachu could jump into the relatively soft net, so soft that they wouldn't get injured despite the fall. So, Ash and Pikachu jumped from the Meowth balloon and landed perfectly into the net, much to the shock and annoyance of Team Rocket. With Team Rocket distracted, Trico and Corphish decided to work together, as Trico used Pound on Corphish to launch Corphish up to the Meowth balloon, allowing Corphish to use a Bubble Beam, which was now close enough to reach the Meowth balloon, allowing the Meowth balloon to pop, sending Team Rocket blasting off. Corphish was happy with this, as he cheered, but Corphish realized that he was falling to the ground and started to freak out. However, just as Corphish was about to crash down to the ground, Trico then used its tail as a cushion to break Corphish's fall. Corphish was obviously shocked at this, as it didn't expect that Trico had liked it that much. He thought that they were just doing a momentary truce, so he thought that Trico was going to try and maybe let it fall to the ground or something. So that's why he was prepared to yell at Trico if he did manage to survive the landing. But now that Corphish had been saved by Trico, it wasn't angry with it anymore, and the two gave each other a stare in the eye of respect, and then a high five of respect, with Brock commenting that Corphish and Trico made a great team. And Corphish and Trico now thought so as well, officially respecting each other now. Yay! Ash then thanked the Nuzleaf family for saving him, leading the Nuzleaf family to just smile and nod, indicating that they now respected Ash and the gang and their Pokemon for taking the time to help save them from the net. Ash and the gang didn't fully realize, though, that the Nuzleaf now had no problems with their Pokemon, so they were shocked to see the Nuzleaf family and all their Pokemon shake hands and play well into the evening. They were definitely glad to see this, though, as they felt that it was great for all of their Pokemon to meet new Pokemon to hang out with, because literally all their Pokemon were now hanging out with the Nuzleaf. Mudkip, Torchic, Lotad, Pikachu, Silcoon, Corphish, Trico, etc. Even Tailo and Fortress joined in, even though they hadn't even met the Fortress before this point. The episode then ends with Ash scanning the Nuzleaf with his Pokédex to learn more about them. And he was immensely impressed by all the facts he learned about the Nuzleaf, declaring that Pikachu happened to meet some very strong Pokemon, hoping that Pikachu would repeat this streak one day, and it could lead Ash to catching some new Pokemon of his own, because he really wanted to catch one of these Nuzleaf, including several more Nuzleaf that had come out, revealing that there was actually more Nuzleaf in the family than just the three of them. But he decided not to, letting the wild Pokemon that clearly enjoyed being wild remain that way.